Oh boy. You're watching Fugitive Redeye. This is Redeye Raw. This is going to be another one of those controversial ones, so yeah, I've been warned. I'm going to try to just be broad, but there are certain things that I have to specifically call out. Because I know I've done so many videos on this already, and like I said, I don't like talking politics. I really don't. But it's gotten to the point where, one side will just speak up all they want, and then everyone else is just expected to just pipe down and not say a single fucking thing. And that other side is expected to not get any backlash, and if you give them backlash, you're a bigot, you're a bad person. And today's topic is I don't think that the news and colleges should be, well, schools in general too, should be politicized, and they fucking are. I'll start with schools, because that's all personal experience. And I've seen it in other things too, like where professors at like Cambridge get promoted when they say white lives don't matter. That legitimately happened, look it up. Or when other people get fired when they bring up crime statistics. Like, yeah, I get that, people might have connotations with that, but they're facts. They are. I'm not saying they prove one thing or another, but they are facts. And to discredit someone because they bring them up and fire them is ridiculous. But my personal experience, right, I was in an English class maybe a year or two ago. I think it was 2018, actually. And in this English class, we were reading this book called Beloved. It's a book that they have a lot of people read in college. It's honestly kind of a terrible book. They try to praise it like it's such a great thing, and like it wasn't boring. I'll give it that. It was a decent enough book. But a lot of the character motivations were just kind of weird. The ending was kind of dumb, and people misinterpret it by far, in my opinion. Of course, there's the whole death of the author theory. Whatever. I don't fucking care. Point is, I read it and got one vibe, and the teacher got a completely different vibe. So, the point of Beloved, right, is that this former slave is haunted by this, like, ghost of her baby that she killed to keep her baby out of slavery. And that ghost, like, grows into a full-grown person, starts, like, leeching off her and feeding off her and fucking, like, slowly killing her, right? Like, it's draining her. And the only character with any sense is this guy named Paul D, who's like, we need to get her away from her. Because, oh, and also the ghost, like, rapes him, and you're supposed to just, like, be cool with it. Like, it's like, he goes for it, but he's, like, mind-controlled into doing it. It's really weird, but you're not supposed to think ill of this ghost, because, it's a female. But it's really fucking weird. And there's this, like, stream of consciousness chapter that's just god-awful, because it's all over the place and doesn't make any sense. And most of the characters I find very unlikable in the book. There's, like, two characters I like, one of them being Paul D. You know what, Stamp Paid was okay, too. And ironically, the original slave owner, like, because he let them buy their freedom and stuff. Like, he was still a slave owner, so he wasn't a good guy, but he was a somewhat sympathetic character. But, again, he was still bad. Then when he died, his nephew took over, and it was much worse, and his nephew was just a piece of shit. Anyway, there's a whole ramble with that book, right? But, like, at the end of the book, I got the vibe that the thing is, the ghost of slavery is haunting over this woman. Slavery's been ended, but it's holding her back. It's draining her life. It's killing her. Like I said, the ghost is literally, like, feeding on her energy and making her, like, wither away. And she becomes completely dependent on it because she's going fucking nuts. So when I see all that, and then when the ghost is gone, things start to get better, I'm like, so the message is to move on from the past, right? The message is, let that shit go. The teacher comes out and says, no, they see, the message of the book is that we will never get over the legacy of slavery. There's no way to rectify it. It will never be normal. We can never let it go, which I think is just toxic, because you can't hold people hundreds of years accountable for shit that people did hundreds of years ago, like 140-something years ago, or whatever it is now. But point is, we got two completely different vibes reading that book, right? And she was very, very adamant about her stance on it. And like I said, the book was never boring. I enjoyed reading it to an extent, but most of the characters were just fucking unlikable and not very good. Like, a lot of the characters were weak-willed and pieces of shit. Like I said, Paul D. and Stamp Paid and Garner were, like, the only characters I like. And Garner was the goddamn slave owner. Again, he was a piece of shit, too. But he was, like, somewhat likable because even though he was doing a bad thing, he was doing it in a less bad way. Right? But anyway, we were after we read that, there was another thing where she brought up an article from Everyday Feminism, of all things, and showed it up on the projector. I was going to say blackboard, but colleges don't really have blackboards anymore. They have whiteboards. Watch those get called racist next and say we need to go back to blackboards or some shit. Anyway, so she puts it up on the projector, and it's talking about whiteness. I immediately saw this, and I'm like, this is a racist article. Now, I know they're trying to change the definition of racism, but fuck that. This article was talking about how, like, white people are normalized and treated all this shit. Like, it's just not really factual. Like, I will say that every country you go to, the majority population is probably seen more as the normal. In the US, though, I don't know that really works because we've got a country with so many different types of people. Like, I do think that, yes, you will see more white people because there's more of us. We are the majority. That doesn't mean anything. Because at the end of the day, I don't think race matters. And that's another thing. She brought up another article that basically said being colorblind and saying that you don't see race is somehow more racist than being like a Klansman. And I'm like, what the fuck is this bitch talking about? That makes no goddamn sense. But then, like, that was before I knew that they believe in this big boogeyman of systemic racism, which is a fucking myth. I'm sorry, racism is real, but systemic racism just fucking isn't. Now, I know there might be some people here that say it is, and whatever, that's a whole other thing. You can believe whatever the fuck you want, I don't care. The point is, she's preaching all of this, and luckily there was this one guy that spoke up against the whole whiteness thing and said that, you know, that's a racist way to look at it, and pointed out, you know, if you go to an Asian country, Asians are going to be the norm, etc., etc. And she said she agreed with him, but she didn't. Like, she said, I agree, well, I agree with what you're saying, but I also don't. And then she went off on this whole tangent about how, you know, it's different because white man bad. There was another time when we were talking about Frederick Douglass, and she said maybe he was woke. Yeah, well, if you really think that, why did they tear down the statue of him, huh? I agree, Frederick Douglass was a good guy. Why are they tearing down statues of him? And that brings me to the news, right? Now, most major news outlets are going through a very biased lens. For instance, there was an 8-year-old girl that was killed by Black Lives Matter protesters, quote-unquote protesters, more like rioters, thugs, insurgents, whatever you want to call them. They were armed, standing outside the Wendy's where Rayshard Brooks was shot, which, again, that was a justified shooting in my opinion. That was a whole other thing. I definitely don't think it was good. Shooting is never good. But ultimately, if you walk around, steal a cop's taser, and fire it at him, what the fuck do you expect to happen? And again, I do feel sympathy for the guy, because it is sad. Death is always sad. But, you know, I don't think that they should be pushing for the death penalty on the guy that took him down, especially when that same DA declared a taser a deadly weapon when cops were using it, but now it's not a deadly weapon now that it was, you know, a civilian. You can't have it one way. You can't have it both ways. It's got to be one way or the other. I'm sorry. Pick your poison. If you say it's not a deadly weapon, fine. But then you can't use that as a precedent later on. If you want to say that this was not a justified shooting, fine. But you got to set precedents for that go across the board. Okay, it has to go both ways. And just because something is justified doesn't mean I agree with it 100%. There might have been other ways to handle that. Who knows? The point is, by the law as it stands now, that was a justified shooting, or at least should be considered one. Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean I agree with it, but it is the case. But anyway, there was these people outside that Wendy's who set up like their own sort of zone, not quite a Chaz, but kind of close. And there was this black family who was pulling up there, doing a U-turn, and their car got fired upon, and their 8-year-old daughter was struck and killed, died in her mother's arms. Little black girl, died. Really sad. There was a GoFundMe for her funeral. Originally, it only had like $1,000. Then, of course, Officer Tatum, very good YouTuber. Again, that's a whole thing. That's very politicized, maybe to say, but I really like his stuff. He sort of shouted out that fundraiser, and thank God they met their goal, because that little girl deserves a good memorial service. But anyway, she got shot and killed, and no one cared. None of these people who supposedly fight for black lives cared that an 8-year-old black girl was killed. And on the news, this is why I'm getting with this, right? Because I'm talking about the news here. On the news, they kept saying she was killed near the Black Lives Matter protest. She was killed near it. She was killed by armed individuals near it. They never said she was killed by them at there, which she was. Which is fucking retarded to me that they're just like, she was killed near. because they're, like, afraid to, like, use the proper fucking terms, because, let's not mince words, she was killed by those people. At that place. Not near it, not by individuals, she was killed by those individuals there. You have a lot of kids that have died recently. There was, like, what, like 5 or 6 kids that died recently because of this. There's been, like, over 80 deaths overall, if not more. I haven't kept the updated number. Like, I haven't seen the updated number, but it just keeps getting worse and worse. David Dorn was one thing where I'm like, that's fucked up. But now they're killing little kids, too. I'm sorry, but this has gotta fucking stop. And the news has gotta stop covering for them. They keep saying, you know, peaceful protests. Mostly peaceful when buildings get burned down. Like, they're like, oh no, a building gets burned down amidst otherwise peaceful protest. Like I said, if these were legitimate peaceful protests, I wouldn't have a problem with them. But they're not. And they haven't been for some time. And a lot of these people that are out actually doing the peaceful protests aren't condemning this action. And in my opinion, that's just enabling at this point. Another thing the news reported on, right? They're like, Trump says Confederates are heroes. That's not what he said. I've actually watched his 4th of July speech. And I get it if you don't like the guy, I do. But, here's the thing. You can't win with lies. So what they had was, he was up there, he was talking about how, you know, tearing down statues is wrong. And the only thing he ever said about Confederates is if you start with the Confederates, what's next? The Founding Fathers? And he was right, that's exactly what happened. They wanted to go for the Founding Fathers. And then, of course, somehow they end up at fucking Frederick Douglass with a statue that was of a freed slave, an abolitionist, and it was the first statue made in the U.S. to commemorate a black person, and they tear it down. It's irreparable. They can't fix it. Then, of course, you have all these news organizations either saying Antifa doesn't exist, or they're not organized. And I'm not going to argue to which degree they are organized, but they definitely are. Whether it's multiple small groups, or one big group, or some combination of the two, they are organized to a degree. Otherwise, you wouldn't see Chaz's popping up in multiple cities. Like, granted, they're not, like, widespread across the nation. Yet. But, yeah, the reason they said that he called the Confederates heroes is because Trump is starting a Garden of Heroes. This is to feature people like the Founding Fathers, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, like, none of these people are Confederates, and Harriet Tubman, okay, you try to tell me that that's somehow wrong to consider her a hero, then you're just contradicting yourself at this point. You have Don Lemon making statements one time, like back in 2013, that are completely contrary to the statements he's making now, like they're the exact opposite almost. And thank God Terry Crews is a sensible guy. I have a lot of respect for Terry Crews, because I've always enjoyed him as a comedian. A very funny actor. So I like to see someone with common sense, who I've always respected, stay respectable. You got the news misleading about several stories, like that guy that hit people on a highway. They say he went around a barricade to hit those people. And it's not confirmed how exactly he got on that highway. They think he might have gone up an exit ramp. But the point is, he was not going around a barricade to hit those people. What happened was, they had put their vans blocking a ramp, and he swerved so he wouldn't hit their vans, and he hit 2 of them. It wasn't intentional. He stopped. He waited to try and help them. They came forward and attacked him, and he slowly inched forward. He never fled the scene. He was there the entire time. And now they're trying to charge this guy with vehicular homicide. It was an accident. He shouldn't have been there. But neither should have they. You don't go on a fucking highway. Especially dressed in dark clothes, in the middle of the night, with no lights, no reflective vest, nothing like that. But if you think this movement is actually about black lives, listen to Don Lemon. He himself has confirmed that it is not. Because he says that, oh, you need to start a different movement for other black lives in other scenarios. So, understand the movement you're following if you're following it. If you still want to follow it in good faith, that's up to you. But when he's straight up admitting it is not about what they claim it's about, then you've lost the plot. When you're tearing down statues of Frederick Douglass, you have lost the fucking plot. Like, I'm already against tearing down any statues, because that's destruction. It destroys history. History is important. We need history, because history makes sure that we don't repeat it. As long as we remember it, we won't repeat it, or at least that's the idea. But, anyway, companies also fall under the whole being political thing, right? Because there are many companies in Seattle that are now training their white employees, segregating their white employees, and teaching them that they are racist. And to reject that and to say that there is no white privilege is somehow more racist and bad. No, I can tell you this. I know I'm not racist. I know 90% of the people I know aren't racist. And to insist that just because we are white, we are racist is a racist statement in and of itself. And no amount of changing the fucking definition in the dictionary is going to change my mind. When you say, oh, people are using this dictionary argument against me, so now I need to change the definition, you have lost the fucking argument, and now you're just being a little bitch about it and being a sore loser. Because you want to play that game, we can play that fucking game. Because feminists did the same thing, where they would use the dictionary definition of feminism, which wasn't what they were actually standing for, they just used the term incorrectly. Much like now these people who call everyone racist are using racism incorrectly. They had to make up their own term, colorism, which is just what racism actually is. They pretend that it's a different thing now. You got the army sending out this email from their, inclusion department or whatever the hell it was called, I don't remember. But they sent out this email basically saying all this stuff is racist, which most of it wasn't, and also that goes against the Hatch Act because they're doing political statements, while they're in the army. And another thing I've noticed, right, a lot of these groups, they're all just chanting in unison. That, to me, does not scream independent thought. That screams herd mentality. All of these people that are chanting, whose streets are streets, whose streets are streets. Which, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Oh, we're going to take the streets. Okay. But, they chant it when they're going onto private property. And then they get mad. And the news, again, back to the news. This couple stands on their lawn with their guns, not shooting anyone. But they go out there because they feel threatened, because they have a mob of hundreds of people coming into their fucking, private street, in their private gated community, yelling, whose streets are streets, and these people are known to get violent, they're known to burn down buildings, this shit is happening all over the country, and then you have people caving to them, like that Seattle mayor saying, we're gonna cut police funding in half, Chaz gets what they wanted, because, we give in to threats, we give in to terrorism, is essentially what she is saying. And if you don't think this is terrorism, then why are people caving in fear? That's literally what it is using fear to get political means. The fear of violence to gain political means. That's what it fucking is. Something you don't see a lot of the news reporting on? Did you know that the Supreme Court literally just gave half of the entire state of Oklahoma to an Indian reservation? And basically said, yeah, Oklahoma state law doesn't matter anymore. You guys make your own laws. You're still under federal law for now. But Oklahoma state law doesn't matter in the eastern half anymore. So if you live in the eastern half of Oklahoma, I got some bad news for you. You're kind of in a foreign nation in a way. It's like a whole other state. Because granted, they're still subject to federal law, so I guess that's just like a new state in a sense. But yeah, the chanting is something I've never got. I'm never going to take you seriously if you're all just chanting the same phrase. It just doesn't resonate with me. I just think, okay, you're just a bunch of sheep. And I know that's, kind of a cliche, kind of a cringy thing to say, but it's true. And, they pick a cause, and they pick a cause that has a name that makes you sound like an asshole if you don't support it. They call it Black Lives Matter. A factually true statement. But again, all lives do matter. And, if you said Black Lives Matter, and it didn't have the connotations of the group carrying it out, I wouldn't even have to combat with all lives matter. Because, I would have been like, yeah, sure, because black is part of all. It's true. It's not mutually exclusive. But that isn't what the group stands for. And another thing, Don Lemon said that, this group is about police brutality. Well, Trayvon Martin was a huge part of what started this movement. And he wasn't killed by police. He was killed by a neighborhood watch. He wasn't even killed by a white guy. He was killed by a Hispanic gentleman. And again, just because, shootings are justified, I'm not necessarily saying one thing or the other about that one, although totally was. Stand your ground rule. When people get attacked and defend themselves, I'm sorry, I don't care if they are a piece of shit, which Zimmerman seems to kind of be. Doesn't mean that it wasn't justified. But just because I think something may or may not be justified doesn't mean I agree with it, doesn't mean I wanted it to happen, because ultimately death should be minimized regardless. But all of these people talking about how, black people are getting gunned down in the streets, which wasn't true. Twice as many white people get killed by police as cops. It's just not publicized. And people will use the argument, yeah, well, black people are, only 13% of the population, and they're killed half as much. Well, yeah, but when people use that same argument about crime statistics, you'll fucking freak the fuck out and call them racist for it. So you can't have it one way or the other with that either. In addition to that, because they have a higher crime rate, they have more interactions with the police. So the fact that they're getting gunned down half as much tells me that this isn't a racial thing. And if you want to believe it's a racial thing, I don't got a problem with that, as long as you're not getting violent and hurting people. Because ultimately, a move towards less death, I always think, is a good thing. So if we can try to figure something out to have less death, I'm all for it. but I don't believe in disarming the police from being able to defend themselves when people are getting violent, because ultimately it's their job to defend the public, and to do that they have to defend themselves. And it's an ugly thing. It isn't pretty. There are unjustified shootings too, like that exterminator or whatever the hell he was that was in that hotel. That he was drunk, and the cop was giving him unclear instructions and shot him. That was unjustified, but you know why you don't fucking hear about it? Because the guy was white. Like, if people want to be included in things, I don't have a problem with that, as long as it's not by force, which it kind of has been. And ultimately, I don't think that, necessarily wanting to have more diversity per se is inherently bad. But again, the connotation comes with it's done by force, and that's all they focus on, which in my opinion is just tokenism. Like, you want more black roles and black actors and stuff? Make more movies with them. But then you force them into, inorganic scenarios, throwing them into franchises that have already been established, replacing roles that already exist, and then crying out racism when people do the exact same thing with white actors. Because here's the thing, ultimately, I don't have a problem with anyone playing any character. Like, for instance, Lawrence Fishburne, great actor, love him. He played the chief of, the FBI or whatever it is in the Hannibal TV series. Now, that guy was originally a white guy, at least in the movie. I don't know about the novel. But didn't bother me because Lawrence Fishburne was a good actor. It didn't drastically, be a detriment to the character, and it didn't, completely change the dynamic. If anything, it made it better. Say what you want about Suicide Squad, but I was okay with Will Smith as Deadshot. I thought he did a decent job, even though that movie overall wasn't the greatest. I liked him. But in the same respect, I don't think Mike Henry needs to step down as Cleveland. Cleveland is a great character. I don't think Hank Azaria needs to be forced out of Apu, although I think he might be totally all for it too. I don't think The Simpsons should be like, we need only, people of color to play people of color. No white people can play any non-white roles. Well, I got some bad news for you. The Simpsons are yellow. So unless you got some Asians there, that's a joke, chill. Or people with jaundice, also a joke, chill. But, point is, The Simpsons are yellow, they're not white. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I do hate to have to do this. Like, I'm not going to say, oh, I didn't want to do this video, because obviously I did. I definitely did, because I'm sick of this shit. But I hate talking politics, and I hate that it's come to the fact that you can't just go on living your fucking normal life anymore. I will give an example here, right? In the earlier days of Family Guy, Rush Limbaugh appeared on the show multiple times. Rush Limbaugh and Seth MacFarlane do not align politically at all. And yet they got along great. They had a good time working on the show together. What the fuck happened to those days? What happened to the days of live and let live? Why is it not that anymore? Family Guy is also getting rid of gay jokes, like they're phasing them out or just getting rid of them altogether. How are you going to have Stewie as a character at all anymore? Like, all of Stewie was gay jokes. I mean, are they going to go back to the whole evil matricidal baby thing that got tired out after the first few seasons? Does that mean Bruce is no longer going to be a character in the show? Is he just going to be gone altogether? I mean, does Herbert fall into that category? I mean, that's a little bit of a different thing, but does he? Family Guy used to be the show that was politically incorrect. It didn't give a fuck what it was doing, and that's why I respect the older seasons so much. And that's why I love the show. But I'm going to be honest, the show's going to be garbage, even more so now than it was before. The show's been garbage for a couple years now, but still. Colleges often teach the book White Fragility. That book is toxic and racist and shouldn't be allowed on college campuses if they truly had a no racism policy, which they clearly don't. They just have a no whitey policy. And books like that are dangerous. And the fact that these schools are able to be so indoctrinating, right? They teach these books. They push, articles from everyday feminism. They talk about whiteness. They talk about how being colorblind is somehow racist. These things indoctrinate people. I used to be indoctrinated into that whole mindset, and legitimately I was. And then, of course, I had my quote-unquote red pill moment. I know, cringe, but that was a whole other thing. Like, that was mainly just because I saw the media coverage of the presidential election was disingenuous. And here's the thing. I still didn't like the guy a few years after that. I'll admit I've warmed up to him quite a bit. I'm not going to care if you like him or not, because ultimately that's, at the end of the day, for me it's following ideas and not people. Like, for instance, I don't believe in political parties. I think political parties are a stupid thing. I don't think they should exist. I think, people should run as independents and should go on the issues, and you follow them based on where you fall in line with those issues. And with every politician, I have my agreements and my disagreements. And this has been a scary year. I legitimately, for the first time in years, I'm actually kind of afraid for the future. These riots and things are getting treated as peaceful protesters. They're great, summer of love, all that. And then people get demonized for protecting themselves. Racism is a boogeyman that shouldn't exist. It doesn't. Not to the extent they say it does. And I feel like, if anything, saying everything is racist just leads more people to become more racist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can see why people would have, like, reservations about talking to people who are different now, because of all this mentality of the us or them thing, which I don't agree with. And obviously, I wouldn't feel that way regardless. I judge people based on their character. But I wouldn't necessarily blame someone if they stopped associating with people. Granted, I would say most of the people I've seen doing the rioting are white. They have white guilt because they're fucking stupid. And are like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry for something I had nothing to goddamn do with. Like I said, I don't believe in original sin. I think it's retarded. But anyway, I have rambled for quite some time here. At the end of the day, racism is bad. Systemic racism I don't think exists. And if it did, I wouldn't think it was to the same degree that people say it did. But regardless of all of that, I do not believe in Machiavellian mindset. I don't believe in the ends justify the means. I don't believe in, killing children and stuff like that to progress some cause. I'm sorry. You've lost the goddamn plot. Again, this all started because of one man. And you could argue there were other contributors too, right? But I would argue more people have died because of this than that. Especially just within the year, or even a couple of years. Because what, like 80 people getting shot? I don't think all of them died. I think maybe we're between 20 to 30 deaths or something like that. I don't know. I haven't kept up with the exact numbers, right? But the point is, people are getting shot left and right. And it's not a good look. And I don't want civil war. I don't. I really do not. Part of this makes me think that if Yellowstone went off and we were all gone, it might be for the better. But anyway, that's it. This has been Fugitive Redeye. And I'm going to try to be optimistic. But it's definitely been a crazy year. And yeah, again, I hate talking politics, but everybody's been doing it. Everybody's been taking a side, and a lot of people have been saying things I disagree with. And if it wasn't for that fact, I wouldn't be speaking up myself. But anyway, see ya.